Fans of the BCS, defenders of the BCS, you who love the BCS, this is your show. Unlike any other show, this is your spot. Welcome into the Voice of College Football on a Monday night, 8 o'clock Eastern Time. We join all of you to go back in time to the decade of 2000 to 2009. We go back in time with all of you tonight and welcome you in, of course, here to the Voice of College Football. We just released our Michigan State spring wrap-up with Ryan O'Blennis from The Only Colors on SB Nation. Check out that video, just released again in the last few minutes. And we got our schedule preview series launched with Maryland and also USC. The USC post over on the Trojans channel here at the Voice of College Football. Before we get started and take all of your calls and comments in the live chat, keep in mind that when you shop Amazon, you know what you do. Grab the Amazon link in the description section of any of the videos, ironically excluding this one. But go to any of the videos, grab the Amazon link, the link that's right next to the word Amazon in large caps. And keep that somewhere where you will remember it to shop Amazon. Same exact shopping experience for you. And of course, hit the like button before you get settled into our college football discussion and debate tonight. Hit the like button to help us grow the channel. If you would like to express your thoughts, your feelings, your analysis on college football, you can write for us at MarkRogersTV at voiceofcollegefootball.com, voiceofcollegefootball.com. Yes, that's where you go. Check out the site first and foremost. But if you go to the site, voiceofcollegefootball.com, right at the top of the screen, you see on the banner where it says, write for us. And go to that page. And I am looking forward to working with you. All right. I was just checking out spring football games coming up this Saturday, which is April 23rd. We've got a slew of them, and we'll be releasing our schedule for this Saturday. Over the past 3 Saturdays, we have been live pretty much all afternoon into the evening for spring football analysis with you, taking your calls and questions and comments. And we will do it at least one more spring football Saturday, this Saturday, the 23rd, with USC on the field and a host of others, including Penn State and Tennessee, Texas A&M, and others. Not Texas A&M, Tennessee. There were 2 other SEC schools coming up this Saturday. LSU. All right, so let's get to it. The phone lines are open, 860-499-3332, but I would like to first introduce our topic for the night. And keep in mind, you don't need to talk about our topic. It is just a topic to get the conversation started. And we had a conversation about a week ago with all of you. Same topic, different decades. So we went through 2010 through 2021. The previous decade plus, and reviewed those national championship seasons and those teams involved. And we will do the same tonight, going back a decade. That will be the only decade that we will do that involves nothing but the BCS. The BCS system is front and center, star of the show tonight. So if you love the BCS, this is for you. If you hate the BCS, this is for you. Disputed national championships from 2000 to 2009. Let's go to that season. So at the conclusion of the regular season and the conference championship games, these were the teams in contention. A slew of undefeated teams. And of course, the 2 at the top are the 2 that were chosen and distinguished because of their Power 5 ranking Their schedules were, of course, much better than Boise State, TCU, and Cincinnati. So Alabama, Texas in the national championship game at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena. Bama won the game 37-21. Colt McCoy, of course, knocked out the first drive of the game. Bama won its first national championship under Nick Saban. Boise State, TCU, and Cincinnati were also in play to a certain extent, depending on your perspective, as undefeated teams. And for Cincinnati, they actually played more ranked teams out of the Big East than you would have thought. Cincinnati took on and defeated Oregon State, South Florida, West Virginia, and Pitt. 4 ranked teams on Cincinnati's schedule. They won all of those games, of course, to arrive at 12-0, and then were completely annihilated by the defending national champion Florida Gators in the Sugar Bowl. Game was 38-3 at halftime. So Cincinnati not up to the challenge of Florida, who had lost to Alabama in the SEC championship game as the Tide avenged the loss from 2008, in which they lost to the Gators in the SEC championship game. So Florida wins in 2008 over Bama to march on to the BCS championship. Bama does likewise in 2009, defeating the Gators, and then Texas in the Rose Bowl. Boise State and TCU played in the Fiesta Bowl, and the Broncos won that game by a touchdown, 17-10 over the Horned Frogs and Gary Patterson to complete a 14-0 season. So that's 2009. Not much controversy there because, again, even though we had 5 undefeated teams, the schedules of Alabama and Texas were far and away tougher than the other 3. Boise State defeated, going into postseason play, 1 top 25 team, Oregon, number 16 in the country. Boise State was at that point in the WAC. TCU was in the Mountain West, and they had defeated Clemson. Ironically, that would have been Dabo Swinney's first year that TCU defeated Clemson on the road and also got the best of number 16, Utah. All right, on to 2008. Utah had the best record in college football during the regular season under Kyle Whittingham at 12-0. Florida 12-1, Oklahoma 12-1, selected by the BCS to play in the championship game. USC was left out. Texas was left out. Now, here's controversy right here. You've got 4 teams with 1 loss that played packed schedules. Florida and Oklahoma played an extra game because they won their conference championship games. Texas had a 3-way tie with Texas Tech and Oklahoma in the Big 12, and therefore was left out of the Big 12 championship game, even though Texas's claim is pretty simple. They had 1 loss, and they beat Oklahoma. USC at 11-1 did not get the nod, and there was not a Pac-12 championship game at the time. So Florida, Oklahoma in the BCS championship game. Of course, the Gators won the game. Utah finished 12-0, and ironically, they were able to match up and defeat Alabama in the Sugar Bowl, a team that took Florida to a 4th quarter game in the SEC championship game. So pretty impressive what Utah did at 12-0. And Utah's run of ranked opponents that season included number 11 TCU, number 16 BYU, and Bama was 4th ranked in the country with 1 loss to Florida when Utah beat Bama in the Sugar Bowl. So, considering the national champion, or the BCS champion, to be more accurate, Florida had 1 loss. Oklahoma, of course, notched its 2nd loss against Florida. USC won the Rose Bowl over Penn State to finish with 1 loss, and Texas beat Ohio State in the final 45 seconds of the game at the Fiesta Bowl. So all those teams on the board finished with 1 loss, all the Power 5 teams excluding Oklahoma, And then Utah completed an undefeated season at 13-0, capping it off with a win against the top 5 Alabama team to stake its claim for a national championship. And I would agree with a stake or a portion of the national championship going to Utah had they lost a game, considering they were in the group of 5 and playing a lesser schedule. I would not campaign for Utah, but since they went undefeated and the national champion had 1 loss, and Utah beat the same team that Florida beat to get to the national championship game, Utah's got a argument here. So does USC, so does Texas. On to 2007. We could spend the next 5 hours on 2007. What a mess. Hawaii 12-0 had the best record. We know that the best record for Hawaii came against inferior competition. All right, among the big boys, the best record in the nation after postseason play and after LSU defeated Ohio State in the BCS championship game, the best record in college football, major college football, Power 5 college football, Kansas, 12-1. Kansas had the best record in the land, and they defeated Virginia Tech in the Orange Bowl. So that's Kansas's claim. 12-1 versus LSU's 11-2. So LSU wins the national championship, or the BCS championship, at 12-2. They lost that season to Arkansas and Kentucky in 2 overtime games. Mizzou and Oklahoma both went 11-2, and then they both proceeded to win their bowl games. No, I'm sorry. West Virginia beat Oklahoma in the Fiesta Bowl. So Oklahoma done. Missouri won its bowl game in 2007. I believe the Cotton Bowl. USC won the Rose Bowl over Illinois in blowout fashion. Georgia won the Sugar Bowl. BYU, I just put them on there, but based on their schedule, do not have an argument. They lost 2 games. So what a logjam at the end. So after postseason play, Hawaii 12-1, but routed by Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. They're done. And BYU done. Oklahoma done. Ohio State with a loss in the BCS championship game done. So LSU's claim is that they played in the best conference and they won the championship game over Ohio State. Kansas's claim is that they went 12-1. They had a better record and they played in a Power 5 conference as well. West Virginia's claim is that they went 11-2 and they were impressive with a 20-point win, 3-touchdown win in their BCS bowl game against Oklahoma. Georgia's claim is that they did not play LSU. So the 2007 SEC championship game was LSU and Tennessee. There was a 3-way tie. I believe I got to check this out. Let me double check this. There was a 3-way tie. It must have been Georgia, Florida, Tennessee. And Tennessee won the tiebreaker, whatever that was. And so Georgia did not play in the SEC championship game. That's the game we needed to see, was LSU and Georgia in the SEC championship game. Tennessee and Georgia. Well, Obviously, the Vols beat the Bulldogs head-to-head, won the matchup directly. So Tennessee went to the SEC championship game. But this season was just a mess. Just a mess. This season would have been perfect for an 8-team playoff. Perfect. All right, let's check out your comments. Keep in mind that the phone lines are open at 860-499-3332. No, I'm not forgetting, John. I'm not forgetting. I think I could recite the scores to those games, so I'm not forgetting those games. But I think there's a reason we play overtime. We play overtime to decide the winner of the games. So if we're going to do that with LSU, we need to go back through every other overtime game in history and determine whether that factored into a championship race, and then say, okay, oh, you lost in overtime? Well, that really wasn't a loss. No, I didn't mention it. I did not mention it. And I understand the argument that football games are 60 minutes, and during regulation time, LSU did not lose a game, but we play overtime and they lost twice. All the way to the top. Savannah saw the title and had to make an appearance. Well, Savannah, what do you or don't you like? Your Georgia Bulldogs were really good in 2007, but they couldn't make it to the SEC championship game because they lost to Tennessee. So that was a tough one. You probably should have joined us the last time we did this, because we did the decade just completed. So Georgia was in play in 2012. The real national championship game, as it turned out, was basically Alabama-Georgia in 2012 in the SEC title game. And, of course, 2021 was good to Georgia. 2017, almost. Thank you, Joey. Appreciate it. Ferris says 1997 disputed. We will get to that in a future show. In 2000 through 2009. All of them. All of them. Thank you, Joey. Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App. And I will post the number on the bottom of the screen there, 860-499-3332. Back at it. This is what I do well, exploring with Ben. I put a target on my chest and say, this is what I think. This is where college football screwed up. And yes, I placed the target on my chest. Hey, Cheryl, good to see you. Thanks for letting everybody know to hit the like button. Oh, and yes, Savannah with a national championship and with a loaded quarterback room can say with a smile, enjoy JT Daniels. We're not necessarily going to miss him. We don't need him. So you desperately need him, West Virginia. So take him away. Enjoy him. It's a good quarterback. Stay healthy, JT. And like I said, I believe that West Virginia has upgraded its quarterback room from bottom 3 to top 3 in the Big 12. Speaking of which, West Virginia has a spring game coming up this Saturday, and we will be all over it. Exploring with Ben, hoping for those Illinois and Rutgers live spring game shows. How many folks do you think we're going to get in here for the Illinois spring game and the Rutgers watch party spring game on Friday. Should I run an experiment on Illinois and Rutgers and just see how many people just want college football watch parties, regardless of what name you put on the screen, and will show up regardless? Something tells me I'm going to be about 90 minutes into those spring games, or whatever we want to call them, those spring practices. We'll see. But as soon as I saw those on the Big Ten Network for Thursday and Friday night, I had the same thought. Man, let's do a watch party. Let's go live. Big news tonight. We've got an animation change by YouTube for hitting the like button. Gary says down season for Mel Tucker and Michigan State. We will get to 1997 at some point. We've got a big project brewing here at the Voice of College Football that I can't unveil yet, but trust me, if you love college football history, you should love this. Uncle Rico has picked up on my fascination with lists and rankings and ratings. Joey's telling us, I think in 2009, Cincinnati had a bunch of players out of that game, meaning the Sugar Bowl loss to Florida. It seems like to me. Maybe. I specifically remember in 2009. So this was, I think this was one of these New Year's 6 BCS bowl games that was played after New Year's Day. So I think there was New Year's Day with the Rose Bowl and whatever else. And I think, I might be wrong, that I don't think it was played New Year's night. I think it was played like the next night. And I remember at the time that the person I was dating, she was okay with me starting to watch the game. And then it got to be such a blowout. I didn't even care if I watched it. And we went out and had a good time. And then, yeah, it was all just, what was the final score? Because it was a lot to a little. 38-3 at halftime. But I don't remember if Cincinnati was missing many players for that game. What year was it when Boise State beat Oklahoma on that miracle last-second hook and ladder play? That was actually they ran a hook and ladder, correct, earlier in the drive, but they won the game on a Statue of Liberty play. 2006. Yeah, Neil, I remember, and you do as well. Yes, that was a big night for Wolfpack football in 2010 because Boise State was on top of the world exactly. And they ran into one Colin Kaepernick and Nevada. Yes, and a mixed extra point in that game, I believe. So Joey, Oklahoma, Texas, 2008. Oklahoma made it to the Big 12 championship game because there was a three-way tie. Texas beat Oklahoma. Oklahoma beat Texas Tech. Texas Tech beat Texas. And then whatever the default was, maybe the BCS. Now, wouldn't that be ridiculous? It might have been the BCS rankings might have decided who went to the conference championship game. That's my guess. Okay. South Division three-way tie controversy. Oklahoma, Texas, Texas Tech all finished the season with identical 7-1 conference records, creating a three-way tie. Under Big 12 tiebreaker rules, ties are normally broken by head-to-head matchups, but this case was unique as Texas beat Oklahoma, Oklahoma beat Texas Tech, and Texas Tech beat Texas, which made breaking the three-way tie impossible because the first four tiebreakers did not dictate a winner. So they had four tiebreakers, whatever those were. Maybe they couldn't have dealt with points. They were probably division record, common opponents, etc. Big 12 rules dictated that the fifth tiebreaker was that the team that was the highest ranked in the BCS, there you go. So the BCS, in all its wisdom, ranked Oklahoma ahead of Texas, even though Texas won the game by 2 scores, 45-35. There you go. That's what I thought. Gary letting us know that Utah embarrassed Alabama in the 09 Sugar Bowl. I saw some of the replay recently right from the start. Yes, they did. They took a lead, and they were never really challenged. What was the final? 38-24? The Pac-12 got a championship game in 2010, I believe. 2010 or 11. Oregon, UCLA. Yes, 2004 Utah had Alex Smith, a future #1 selection in the NFL draft at quarterback, versus 08 and Brian Johnson. Poor Hawaii had a matchup against Georgia. That was not fun. Yes, Joey, Kansas could have won a national championship only 15 years ago. Kansas. And Dave is telling us that in 2006, the best teams did not play again. Let's check it out. $31-17. Okay, same point spread. So in 2006, Ohio State was the consensus #1. They went wire to wire at #1, 12-0. Florida 11-1 after the SEC championship game in which they defeated Arkansas. Michigan lost to Ohio State on the last weekend of the season, 42-39. Louisville, of course, did not face the type schedules that the other three did, but I include them as well at 11-1. And so not a whole lot of controversy here. Some people campaigned for Michigan to play in a rematch against Ohio State, but obviously the game had already been played and should not have been a rematch, much like 2011, although there were not at the time divisions and conference championship games. And Florida ambushed Ohio State in the national title game 41-14 and won the national title. Not a lot there to review, except I believe USC lost They lost 2 games in the regular season. Then they beat Michigan by 2 touchdowns at the Rose Bowl. I believe. Yeah, surprisingly, that season, USC lost. They lost to Oregon State 33-31, and they lost to UCLA at the Rose Bowl 13-9. So they already had 2 losses. They beat Michigan at the Rose Bowl. All right. So 2006, pretty clear cut, although Louisville, again, depending on your perspective, let's look at their schedule. I know that they beat Wake Forest, the ACC champion, in the Orange Bowl. So Louisville, who'd they beat that was any good? Number 15, Miami, 31-7. They beat Kansas State, who was not ranked at the time of the game, 24-6. They beat Syracuse, 28-13. They beat then number 3, West Virginia, 44-34. Louisville's loss was at Rutgers, 28-25. And then they beat a top 15 Wake Forest team, 24-13 in the Orange Bowl. All right, 2005, clear cut as well. USC, Texas ran through their schedules, were dominant. The only reason I noted Penn State was it would have been fascinating. I think we still would have seen USC and Texas. Penn State kind of came out of nowhere to go 11-1 that year, and Penn State's one loss was in the final second of the game in Ann Arbor to, I believe, a touchdown by Mario Manningham, who, of course, had the great catch in the Super Bowl to propel the Giants on the final drive to win the game against the Patriots in 2011. But Mario Manningham, and if I got that wrong, Michigan fans correct me, I believe it was Manningham back of the end zone against Penn State at the Big House with 1 second left. Otherwise, we would have had 12-0, 12-0, 12-0. But that made it clear cut USC Texas. Another side note was that Texas won an extremely important game and entertaining game and close game against Ohio State at Ohio Stadium that year. A game in which Ohio State had a 2-score lead in the fourth quarter. Or no. They had a 1-score lead. Ryan Hamby dropped a wide open touchdown pass in the end zone for Ohio State that would have opened the lead out to 10 or 11 or 12, 2 scores, and might have sealed it. This was college football in 2005, not 2021. A 2-score lead against a great defense with 6-7 minutes left in the game might have sealed it, but Ohio State dropped the ball, kicked the field goal, was only up, I think, 5, and Texas scored the game-winning touchdown. Vince Young to, I can't remember. I can see it, but I can't remember the Texas receiver's name. But Texas won 25-22. Or otherwise, you would have had USC 12-0, Texas 11-1, Ohio State 11-1, Penn State 11-1. So it could have been pretty dicey without Texas pulling it out in Columbus, or Penn State, if they were able to defend the last play at the Big House. We would have had a bit of a mess among 4 giants. But USC, Texas clearly distinguished themselves as undefeated teams and then played a classic at the Rose Bowl, of course. To your comments, Limas Swede. Yes. Thank you, Daniel. Appreciate that. And Daniel, an Ohio State fan. Yes. Limas Swede. Yes. Remember it well. And yes, Tim, of course, the 05 Rose Bowl, meaning the 04 season in which Texas and Michigan played at the Rose Bowl, and Texas won on a last-second field goal, 39-37. Great game. Yeah, 2005. So USC at one point in that game, fourth quarter, had a 9-point lead, correct? They had a 9-point lead. Again, this is a different style of football to a certain extent. A 9-point lead meant more then than it does now. And also, they had the Reggie Bush long run where he got stripped, fumble, turnover, and Texas took control. Yes, I thought of the same thing, Joey. Rutgers with Ray Rice in 06. That is probably the biggest win in recent Rutgers football history, going back to a time when none of us would have known anything about Rutgers football, but they played, I believe, that game on ESPN on a Thursday night, and great game against Louisville. Rutgers won it, and that knocked Louisville out of it in 07, 06. The real MVP will continue to get on me for not pronouncing Louisville correctly. Louisville, Louisville, Louisville. Ferris, I don't know how old you are or if you remember that game from 16 years ago, but there was a huge cry for a rematch. But I couldn't justify it. Yes, there it is, Gary. Thank you. Reggie Bush, lateral fumble, so dumb. Vince Young would have won anyway, though. I don't know. I don't know. The real MVP is proud of me, and that is my takeaway from tonight. I was able to pronounce Louisville up to the Louisville to the real MVPs. I just throw a little Louisville. That's how I always say it, Louisville. Maybe I throw a little Louisville. I throw an extra little minute syllable in there. I don't say Louisville, though. It's Louisville. I used to say Louisville. Well, Gator fan, it's easy to say that now, but at the time it was not so easy to say that because Florida they were really good, of course. And I'm talking about at the time, the evaluation was that they're really good. But the SEC had not won a million consecutive national championships at the time. The SEC had not won one in 05, 4, 3. Well, 3 was LSU. So they had only won 03, did not win in 02, 01, 2000, 99, 98. So this was not an automatic SEC. Well, the SEC team needs to be there. They must be the best team. None of that at the time. And Ohio State and Michigan, to many people, and I'm talking about football people, I'm talking about people that know the game and know how to evaluate it. I was hung up on John's comment about my pronunciation of Louisville and working with an acting coach. What? John keeps correcting me on things that I'm not incorrect on. Again, John, please. I think you've been watching long enough to know I know who's won every national championship. Yes, Tennessee 23-16 over Florida State. I watched that game too. Yes. I just said that. So Falconer X, thank you so much for that. Appreciate the super sticker from Falconer X and the finest avatar on YouTube. Football people like Kirk Herbstreit, who said Florida was clearly superior. He said that after they played. Any moron could say that after they played, and I'm not calling Kirk Herbstreit a moron, but I'm just saying that he was stating the obvious that we all said after the game, that Florida was the best team in the country. They just killed Ohio State. Yes, they were the best team in the country, but not many people were saying that. They were a 7-point underdog in that game. Not many people were saying that before the game. It would be difficult, I'm sure, to dig up because digital media wasn't, it was around, but it wasn't common then to be able to find predictions and comments made by football analysts in 2006. Falconer X, we will now get to the 2002 National Championship game. We will do that for you and for everyone else. John is asking for permission to call Herbstreit a stupid jerk. So you guys take a vote, and then John can turn his question into a statement. Daniel says Troy Smith was fat on his Heisman. Well, Troy Smith wasn't necessarily fat on his Heisman. Maybe he was. I can't get into guys' hearts and minds to know exactly what his mindset was. He spent most of that game running for his life and being chased down and thrown on the turf. I guess that's grass. That's grass in Arizona at the Fiesta Bowl field there in Scottsdale. But he was running for his life. What lost that game more than anything else for Ohio State is that their offensive line, especially on the edges, could not block Florida. Couldn't block them. And Ohio State, from everything I've ever read and also in conversation with insiders, have said that Jim Tressel, unfortunately for Ohio State, went full bore on creating a game plan that was centered around Ted Ginn, who, as we well know, returned the opening kickoff for a touchdown and got hurt in the celebration, and he was done. He was gone. Yeah, look at this line. I probably could have recited that line. It is incredibly ugly. 4 for 14 for 35 yards and a pick. After Ginn returned the opening kickoff for a touchdown, then it was clear that Ohio State's linebackers were too slow to cover Florida in space. And that Ohio State team was pretty loaded. Pretty loaded. Malcolm Jenkins, who just recently retired, James Laurinaitis, and so forth. But yeah, that was not a pretty game. Then Florida marched out to it was 27-7. Then Ohio State scored a touchdown to make it 27-14, and that's the last time that game was remotely competitive. Absolutely. Too much Florida speed in regards to, rush ends, outside linebackers in particular. Absolutely. And, Daniel's heard enough. And I think what tricked a lot of people as well, including me, was that the Big Ten had just played. So teams that played Florida that season played against comparable Big Ten teams in bowl matchups just a week prior. And the Big Ten won 2 bowl matchups. Wisconsin beat Arkansas, and Penn State beat Tennessee in bowl games. So, of course, the narrative coming out of the postseason that year was that the SEC had taken over and was so much better than the Big Ten, which Florida was so much better than Ohio State, at least on that night. But the SEC versus the Big Ten, well, people don't necessarily pay attention to the entire narrative. Yes. Wonelli college football game. Yes. Seiler and Everett, Moss, Harvey. Yes. A few of them drafted in the first round of the NFL draft. All right. Back to the seasons. 04. Unfortunately, we needed a playoff here. USC and Oklahoma started the season at 1-2, and was, as customary at that point, was you pretty much held your spot, especially up in the rankings. You held your spot. So USC and Oklahoma held their spots at 1-2, and Auburn started the season at number 19, and they just shot up the rankings, but they hit the ceiling, and they could not get into the BCS championship game. I would have loved to have seen, and said this before the game, USC and Auburn play. But, of course, USC mauled Oklahoma 55-19. Utah did not play a ranked team the entire season, so I just put them on there just because of their excellent season, but in no way should they have been considered because of the schedule. Of course, we're including group of 5 teams here, but Utah did beat a number 19 Pitt team by 4 touchdowns with Alex Smith and, of course, Urban Meyer. And that was before Urban Meyer took the Florida job, but Utah blasted Pitt in the Fiesta Bowl, but it was USC on to the national championship, and Auburn did what would be unthinkable now, an undefeated SEC team not given the opportunity to win a national championship. 03. Would have loved to have seen, I'm sorry, I forgot USC. Forgot to put USC on this graphic. Would have loved to have seen LSU and USC. I'm going to guess on USC's record. It should have been going into the Rose Bowl, probably 11-1. So there we go. Me and everybody else wanted to see LSU and USC. But the BCS spit out LSU and Oklahoma. Oklahoma had just gotten drubbed by 4 touchdowns in the Big 12 championship game, and it was a 1-touchdown game, but if you watch the game, LSU was the superior team. Oklahoma found ways to stay in the game, and LSU won 21-14. USC won the Rose Bowl by 2 touchdowns. Tell me if you've heard this before. 2 touchdowns over Michigan. And we'll include Ben Roethlisberger's. No. 2003, Roethlisberger was gone. I don't know who the quarterback was at Miami of Ohio. That Miami of Ohio team defeated. Oh, yeah, Roethlisberger was there. 04 was his first year. He was drafted in 04. So that was Roethlisberger. For a second, I was like, wait a second. Anyway, for a split second, I had a flashback to 2001's AFC Championship game between the Patriots and the Steelers, thinking that was Roethlisberger's team. Of course, it wasn't. That was Cordell Stewart. But 2004, they, of course, played in the AFC Championship game in Roethlisberger's rookie season. So he had just piloted that Miami team to 12-1, and they defeated Louisville in the Liberty Bowl by 3 touchdowns. Impressive run by Miami. I wonder where they finished in the rankings. I would think close to the top 10 at 13-1, winning a bowl game over Louisville by 3 touchdowns. But LSU, the split national championship with USC, the AP winner and the Rose Bowl winner. Back to those comments. Tim is telling us that USC team fumbled in the end zone in double overtime against Cal. That would have been Cal with Aaron Rodgers. Yeah, there it is. Aaron Rodgers, Marshawn Lynch, etc. Great Cal team, which is unthinkable now. Cal had a great team, but they did. Cal's produced many more NFL players than most people realize. Falcon Rex letting us know that the fraudulent crime organization known as the NCAA robbed Miami of at least 5 more natties with the help of fake media. We'll also, in upcoming live stream episodes of our call-in show that we will continue to go through decades of dissecting disputed national championships, we will also uncover, in addition to maybe the national championships that Miami could have won, also the ones that they were, I'm not going to say given, but there's a couple that, including their first, that can be debated. So Miami's right where they need to be with the 5. Michael says, Mark, why are you trying to get me in a bad mood for the Ohio State-Miami game? The Ohio State-Miami game. Yes, disputed. I agree, Gary. I give Auburn a portion of the championship in 2004. Hit the like button. It's all one word. Hit the like button. All right, back at it. 2002. Well, that's pretty clean. Nobody else was undefeated, and nobody else even with one loss worth noting. 2002, Ohio State 13-0. Very rare situation in which there was no conference championship game. We were still 8 years away in the Big Ten, and Ohio State scheduled 13 games. And we were only one season removed. Think how odd this was. We were only one season removed from 11-game regular seasons. Ohio State only had, and just about everybody else in the country in 2001, 11-game regular seasons. And Ohio State jumped it to 13, a 13-game regular season. And they had never had a, they had a couple 12-game regular seasons, 1986, 1997, 1994, a few. But college football had been playing an 11-game regular season for 3 decades, going back to the early 70s. And Ohio State scheduled 13 games. And they had a difficult non-conference schedule with Cincinnati, Washington State, who went to the Rose Bowl, and Texas Tech. And Ohio State had some impressive games, but also was certainly riding the high wire in a number of those games against Illinois, overtime, Penn State. They won that late. Purdue, of course, with the Holy Buckeye. Miami was on a roll. They had mauled their way to the national championship the previous season. They had 34 consecutive wins. We were earlier on the subject of Kirk Herbstreit and his analysis. I still remember him before the game predicting, despite Ohio State being a 2-touchdown underdog, I think it was 14. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it was 14. Herbstreit picked Ohio State to win. I won a massive bowl pool at work with like 70 people in it because I was in about 9th place, which was pretty high, of course, with 70 people, but still nowhere close to winning. prior to the national championship game, which that being the last of the non-BCS championship games. So the BCS was in play and was established since 98, but there was no BCS championship game. There were just a bowl game designated for the national championship game, the Fiesta Bowl, in this particular year. Miami was rolling, legendary, 34 consecutive wins. And yes, again, I remember Herb Street called the upset, and the Buckeyes won the game. All right, 2001 was kind of a mess. Aside from Miami, they earned their way to the BCS championship, 11-0, playing in the Big East. After that, what do you do? Nebraska went 11-1, but they did not make their conference championship game. They lost to Colorado and got blitzed by the Buffs, giving up 62 points. So Colorado won the division by beating Nebraska head-to-head. However, Colorado had lost another game non-conference, so they were 10-2. I put Texas in there at 10-2 because both Texas and Oklahoma, they tied for the other side of the Big 12 conference, but they did not. Neither one of them played Nebraska. Colorado played Nebraska, and they killed them. Illinois was not very good by these standards of competing for a national championship. But if you just look at the wins and losses, they went 10-1, and they won the Big Ten championship. And because the because the BCS championship was played at the Rose Bowl, Illinois went to the Sugar Bowl and got killed by LSU. But going into postseason play, Illinois, they had a claim, 10-1. Oregon had a claim. And most people believe that Oregon should have been selected by the BCS. Oregon only lost to I wish I had it here. Oregon lost to somebody respectable. And once Miami killed Nebraska 37-14, and the game wasn't nearly that close. And Oregon whipped Colorado 38-16 at the Fiesta Bowl. It just appeared as though really Miami was the best team and everybody knew it. And they proved it, but probably nobody was going to play with them in a championship game. But if somebody was that earned it, that earned the shot, it looked like it was Oregon. Let's see here. Oregon lost to Stanford, 49-42 at home. That was their loss. Oregon's big wins that season in 2001, they beat Wisconsin 31-28. They beat USC 24-22. That was Pete Carroll's first team. That was only like 6-6. They beat Cal 48-7. They beat Washington State, a top 10 team, 24-17. They beat UCLA, who was ranked, 21-20. And Oregon State was good. They beat them 17-14 before, again, the Fiesta Bowl. So Oregon probably would not have hung with Miami either, but they probably had the best shot of the teams in consideration. So Miami easily won a national championship that year. I do think that Miami was challenged once or twice. Was that the year that Boston College almost beat them? Was that the Ed Reed interception? They beat Boston College like 11-7. Was that the game? That the year? Oh, I think they were up. They were up 11-7. Boston College was inside the 5. Ed Reed picked it off, went the distance. They won 18-7. Yes, against Boston College. They did not have any other close games. Oh, yes, they did at Virginia Tech to close the season, 26-24. So they had 2 close calls. Otherwise, they blasted their schedule and blasted Nebraska as well. And then finally, 2000, this one heaped in controversy as well. Of course, Oklahoma earned its spot undefeated, the only undefeated team in the country. But who do you select? Well, Florida State was chosen by the BCS, but the problem was Florida State lost to Miami. So, of course, Miami should have gone, right? Well, no, Miami lost to Washington. And Washington won the Pac-12, won the Rose Bowl, and they had the same record as Miami. So I guess Washington should have gone. Washington's one loss was highly respectable. Washington's loss was against Oregon State, 33-30. That Oregon State team went 10-1. So in my book, it's a tough call. There should be a playoff. That would have been a sweet 8-team playoff because you had Oklahoma, Florida State, Miami. That's 3. Virginia Tech, the reason we're not talking about the Hokies was that they lost by a pretty wide margin, I believe, to Miami. I know that they lost to Miami, but I don't think the game was close. So Virginia Tech, despite being 10-1, really not in the conversation. So again, Oklahoma gets its spot. Who do you choose? Well, for me, it's Washington. They beat Miami, and they only lost to Oregon State 33-30. A really good Oregon State team that finished 11-1. So the BCS screwed up again with Florida State. But for an 8-team playoff, let's see, at this point you had 5 conferences, right? SEC, Big 10, ACC, Big 12, Pac-12. No, you had the Big East. So let's say we had a 6 spots for conference champions and then 2 in addition. You would have had Oklahoma, the Big 12, Florida State, the ACC, Miami, the Big East, Washington, the Pac-12. We would have had an issue here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because you still need the Big 10. That was Purdue. And the SEC was Florida. So either Virginia Tech or Oregon State would have been knocked out, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. No, you got those 6. So, wow, this is football at a different time because the wild cards would have come from the Big East and the Pac-12. So you would have had the 6 on the screen plus Purdue and Florida. That would have been a heck of a playoff with Florida State, Miami, and Washington. Yes. So that would have been your playoff in 2000. Your 8-team playoff would have been beautiful. I should probably do a video with an 8-team playoff for all these seasons. I was also thinking about doing a video series where we revert back to the bowl games, the bowl system before the BCS, and add a +1. So go back to all those seasons and then add the +1 of what would have been the selection process of selecting the best +1 to determine the national championship game matchup after the bowl games. A system that a lot of people propose and push now. And I got to say, after I thought about it, it's not bad. Crazy exercise. So the most recent season without the BCS or the playoff was 1997. That's an easy call because the 2 teams that needed to play, undefeated Nebraska, who won the Orange Bowl in the Big 12 championship, Michigan, who won the Big Ten championship and the Rose Bowl and were undefeated as well. Those were the two teams in 1997. So you're +1 easy in 1997. That was the game that had to be played. Yes, Dave, Purdue won the Big Ten championship. They won the tie. There was a 3-way tie for the Big Ten championship in 2000, and Purdue went to the Rose Bowl. So they, whatever the tie-breaking system, you know what? Purdue may not have won it with a realistic tie-breaking system because I think that Big Ten at that point was still stuck in their antiquated, the team that went to the Rose Bowl the furthest, the least recent, got to go to the Rose Bowl. So Michigan was always going to Rose Bowls, and Northwestern had been to the Rose Bowl in 1995. So Purdue got to go to the Rose Bowl and represent the Big Ten. But if you go through a tie-breaking system, maybe it would not have been Purdue. It might have been Michigan. It might have been Northwestern. Coos is telling us, let's see, 2007, if there was a +1, West Virginia could have gotten a shot at LSU after beating down Oklahoma in the Fiesta Bowl. Or, I know you're leaning, Justin. I know you're leaning, and I get it. I know you want your Mountaineers in a national championship scenario there, but Kansas went 12-1. So Kansas, I guess, would have played LSU. And really, we don't know what the +1 would have looked like because there was a BCS championship game. So there would not have been an Ohio State LSU BCS championship game. There would have been in 2007 if we would have reverted to the previous system of just playing bowl games. There would not have been an LSU Ohio State game. LSU would have gone to the Sugar Bowl and played 07. Well, Georgia and Hawaii played in the Sugar Bowl. So I guess LSU would have played Hawaii in the Sugar Bowl. Georgia would have been out wherever. They would have played in the Citrus Bowl or something. Ohio State would have gone to the Rose Bowl, knock out Illinois. Ohio State would have been repping the Big Ten at the Rose Bowl against USC. So let's say this would have played out the way we expected. I believe USC would have beaten Ohio State in the Rose Bowl in 07. LSU would have won that game at the Sugar Bowl, and the other games would have been the same. So I guess your +1 would have been Kansas, and whoever the voters liked or the committee or whoever was set up to determine who comes out as a 2-loss team, because it would have been West Virginia, USC, LSU, Missouri. Am I forgetting anyone? At least those 4. So you would have had a 4-way tie with 2 losses between teams that would have played Kansas for the national championship in a +1 in 07. If I could make a living on talking about this stuff and setting up models and rewriting history, that's what I would do. That 2007 LSU defense was stacked with an ample offense. Beating them while fully healthy was a tall order. Absolutely. I believe they were the best team. And in that scenario, it would not have been a good thing for LSU to be playing Hawaii in the Sugar Bowl to try to prove that they should go on to the national championship game. We would have gotten maybe, you know what, since they did not play in the SEC championship game, we should have had an LSU Georgia Sugar Bowl to set up the +1. Tim is saying the biggest BCS screw up was 2008 snub of USC. That defense was sick. So again, in 2008, it was Florida, 1 loss, Oklahoma, 1 loss, even though Texas beat Oklahoma and only had 1 loss, and Texas beat them by 10 points. And to Tim's point, USC sitting there with 1 loss as well. So 2008, let's say in 2008, we did not have a BCS championship game, but we had a +1. So Oklahoma would have gone to the Orange Bowl. Well, the Orange Bowl was the BCS championship game. I can't do this without pen and paper and graphics so everybody can follow along. So we won't get into 2008. But yes, it would have been fascinating to see Florida play USC. That would have been a fascinating game. Oklahoma gave Florida a decent game, but not a great game. Forget about who deserved it or who earned it necessarily. And I'm big into that. As you guys know, I want to figure out, okay, who really earned it. But just talking about who were probably the best teams that we would have wanted to see play. During this 10-year period, in 2000, we got Oklahoma, Florida State. I think people wanted to see Oklahoma, Miami. I think who really earned it the most was Oklahoma, Washington. In 01, we got to see Miami, Nebraska. Well, I think most people would have thought Oregon would have been the team that with the best chance of giving Miami a game. So Miami, Oregon would have been a better selection in 01. In 02, perfect. Ohio State, Miami. 03, it was LSU, Oklahoma. What did we need to see? LSU, USC. In 2004, we saw USC, Oklahoma. What did everyone want to see? USC, Auburn. 2005, Texas, USC. Perfect. 2006, Ohio State, Florida. Even though it wasn't a good game, that was the game that needed to be played. Fine. 2007, I think the 2 best teams in the country were LSU and USC. 2008, yes, Tim, again, USC, Florida would have been a phenomenal game. Think about the games that we're setting up here. 2000, take your pick. Not Oklahoma, Florida State, Oklahoma, Miami, or Oklahoma, Washington. 2001, not Miami, Nebraska, Miami, Oregon. 2002, fine, we're good. 2003, not LSU, Oklahoma, LSU, USC would have been killer. 2004, not USC, Oklahoma, USC, Auburn. 2005, perfect. 2006, fine. 2007, again, not LSU, Ohio State, LSU, USC. 2008, even though it was a decent game, not Florida, Oklahoma, Florida, USC. Then 2009, fine. That was the game we needed to see. Bama, Texas. LBC Trojan says, yes, USC versus the SEC from 2003 through 09. Pretty much. Yep, I agree. Good call. Obviously not in 2005, but every other year, sure. Yes, USC in 03, 04, 05, 6, 7, 8, not 2009. It should read 03, 4, 5, 6. What I miss? Hang on. Timeout. USC 03, 4, 5, 7. Although the 06 USC team, yeah, that would have been a good game against Florida. But you went a year too long, but point well taken. Yeah, I think USC's dominance during that decade is undersold because they narrowly missed out so many times. And the Rose Bowl connection and the BCS and all of that in 03 screwed us up. And yeah, they almost won two back. They won. Well, let me back up here. Of course, 03 was a split championship. 04 they won it. 05 they came within that much of winning it. So it could have been three straight with a split. And then, yeah, 06 close, 07, 08, three more close calls. That run was crazy good. That's like I was adding up the numbers, and I don't know who would be second in the Big Ten, probably over the last decade since 2012, probably either Wisconsin or Penn State. But Ohio State in the Big Ten, their regular season records since 2012, so the last 10 seasons in the Big Ten, Ohio State is 107-8. That's their regular season record since 2012. 107-8. They did not lose any games in 2012 or 13 in the regular season. 14-1, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. Yes. 107-8 for Ohio State in the last 10 years. And I can't imagine anybody in the Big Ten is within 25 games of that. All right, folks, I think we've done our damage here. I had set out to go through the decade of the 2000s and the national championship scenarios and take all of your comments and take all of the flood of calls that we received tonight. I went through the process of having to listen to the horrible piano music and setting up the phone lines. But everybody's shy tonight or nobody wants to talk to me. I'm going to save my ego. I'm going to save my self-esteem and just assume everybody's shy tonight or in a drunken stupor or something. All right. So we'll be back, of course, on Tuesday with our Iowa show and Nebraska show. That would be at 5:30 and at 7 Eastern. And then also on Wednesday, of course, we've got a flood of shows. And as was suggested to me the other night by Tim, I really want to post a regular schedule of call-in shows. And so you guys know that I'm going to be here. Shoot, maybe we should just do a call-in show every night at 8. And that could be that. And I think we might grow the channel faster that way. All right. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. We've got, who do we have on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's the real MVP.
It is. I was just about to shut this thing down.
Well, a few people didn't want you to shut it down, and they were frantically having somebody call in. And I know I'm usually the first caller, so I thought, got to keep tradition alive for tradition's sake.
You would be the one to do it. So here you are. What you got for me?
Well, so you were talking about USC and their undervalued dynasty that they had.
Yes.
And my question to you is, do you think Lincoln Riley can bring them back to having that type of dynasty again?
No.
No,
Oh,
no shot.
can he? Does he have a shot? Yes, he's got a shot. Yes. He's a capable football coach. He's really good. He's hyped a little bit more than what he's proven to me. And the Pac-12 isn't today what it was at that time. We just went through that decade, and we talked about Washington, we talked about Oregon, we talked about Oregon State multiple times. And so he can't take on that kind of responsibility for the entire conference. But yeah, he's got a shot. But to do what Pete Carroll did, to win at that rate, that's Nick Saban and Urban Meyer and Dabo and nobody else.
Well, they're paying him for those types of expectations.
Yeah,
so
they are.
If there's one coach who's going to transcend into that, it's got to be him. And here's something else for you, Mark.
Okay.
If there's a team, you know how in 2019 LSU kind of came out of nowhere and just took the college football world by storm, had one great season, and then completely fell off the face of the earth.
Yeah.
What team could do that in 2022?
Well, I'm not knocking your comment, but you know me, I'm going to just be pretty specific here. LSU did finish number 6 in the country the year before.
Yes, but what I mean is nobody had them completely dominating everybody outside of Alabama.
True. All right.
And I'm just saying, is there a team that hasn't won a title in a while, that used to win a title, or maybe has never won a title, that could do something like that and just completely dominate everybody they play outside of one or two games?
So you're not going to take Ohio State as an answer?
No.
Okay. Because they would be the first one.
I'm looking for something off the radar.
Okay. Outside the 2 in the SEC, they would be the first one. I think those 3 teams are the best teams in the country. But Ohio State, I was just responding to you saying somebody who has not won a title in a long time, which, depending on your perspective, it's been 7 years. So it's not that long, but to some people, it's been forever. Win the title, win the national champion. Okay, well, here's your team. I can't imagine anybody else, yes, that would be capable of winning the national championship under that criteria, except Texas A&M.
That was the team I was thinking about. And I think if Texas A&M did win the title, would there ever be a time where one conference has won a title 4 straight years, but yet it'd be 4 separate teams to win it?
So what are we going to there?
Well, okay, so LSU won in 19, Bama won in 20, Georgia won in 21, and if Texas A&M won in 22.
Oh, from the same conference.
Has there ever been a conference just yeah. That just shows like quality of conference, the depth of it.
I can't imagine. I no. Yeah, 4 is deep. Yeah. Yeah. No. I will be pretty safe to say no, that's never happened.
Okay. And for this week, Mark, there's a lot of spring games coming up for a lot of different teams. Do you have any plans for streaming on Saturday, doing a watch party? Because you got some pretty notable teams playing on Saturday. For the spring game.
We'll be here. I've got to figure it out for sure, but I believe what we're going to do is, I don't know that there's anybody on TV at noon. Penn State's on at 2. We might do a quick look at Penn State from 2 to 3 and then go with USC at 3 Eastern. And then after that, I don't know who else. Again, there's a lot of teams, but I can't see them. Oklahoma, Texas, I don't know how quickly their
Well,
highlights
Iowa
are going to be
starts it off
posted.
at 10:45.
Yeah.
They don't announce. They're not on TV.
Exactly. Iowa
but-
can. Yeah. They're not getting me streaming at 10:45 in the morning, especially something I can't see.
Notre Dame's on the Peacock Network at 1.
Shoot, I don't know if you saw
See
this,
how
but
Mark is free?
well, I'm not going to see that either. But I don't know if you were with us at the time, but last season's Iowa State game, Corey was out at the stadium at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. It was still pitch black out. He was out at the stadium doing live streams out at the stadium, talking to people in line and camping out. And so maybe we can get Corey to do the 10:45 in the morning Iowa live stream.
You know what? If you kind of expanded that to like a pregame show and had like did that for like a big game a week or something like that, that would be really cool, in my opinion. Like if you had somebody go to Notre Dame, Ohio State. Now I don't know who would do it, but I think that would be really cool.
Well, we'll see. That could be the problem, but yes, it would be very cool to get. We got our Virginia Tech guys, so Paul and Mike do Virginia Tech pregame on the Virginia Tech ESPN network channel, radio station, whatever you want to call it, in Blacksburg. And so they simulcasted live stream each and every Virginia Tech pregame on the channel here. So yeah, the more of that kind of stuff that I can get a hold of would be phenomenal.
And well, I see Oregon. They play at 4 on the Pac-12 network.
Yeah, I don't get that either.
Okay, what about Texas at 7 on the Longhorn network?
I don't get it.
You don't get the. I'm shocked you don't get the Longhorn network. I mean, they're constantly showing the 2005 Rose Bowl for anybody who wants to watch it. Who wouldn't want to watch that game?
From working where I worked, and we didn't run the Longhorn network because, of course, it's out in. It actually the studios and so forth, of course, are on campus in Austin, but actually the master control where the signal comes out of is in Burbank in Los Angeles. But we would have to sometimes, when they had maintenance and so forth, we would have to take it back in Bristol. And yes, they would show that game like 4 times a day. It seemed it was on constantly, like, because we would have a system where it would show us how many times that particular show aired, because for screening purposes and so forth, we would sometimes have to know how many times did this show air. And it would be like, 407 times, the 2005 national championship game.
I mean, I get it was a great game, but I don't understand how you can watch any game that amount of time.
Well, that's all they've got. That's their game.
And they don't have quality football now. They can show their rerun of losing to Kansas over and over again, I guess. Kansas, but yet, Mark, they've got the 5th best chance to make the playoffs this year.
Yeah, they do.
Even though they just lost to Kansas.
Well, the real MVP, you have inspired others. We've got a line formed now.
Well, listen, man, I just do what I do best, and I just lead the herd of people.
Yes, you do. There it is.
And the final thing I'll say is Nevada plays at 9 p.m. because of the one Nevada fan in the chat.
Oh, nice. See? Hey, I would be here for that. If we could get it on TV, if we could watch it, hey, I would do it. Just like I'm contemplating Illinois Thursday night watch party, Rutgers Friday night watch party.
Well, Memphis also plays on Friday along with TCU.
Okay.
Now,
well, okay.
So I'm not sure if they're on TV or not, but
I don't think so.
Somewhat decent football schools.
Sure. All right, man.
So that's all I got for you, Mark. And And make sure to hit the like button to keep the stream going.
Absolutely. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you next time.
All right. Yes, the real MVP is inspired the throngs. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Mark, Tim, how you doing?
Hey, Tim.
You just brought something that's pretty cool. I'd love to hear your take on. You listed 4 really great coaches. And I'm curious for you to put them in order on your Mount Rushmore here. You have Urban Meyer, Saban, Carroll, and Dabo. How do you rank those 4? It'd be a great show too, by the way. I think those are the best coaches since the 2000s.
Yes. Number 1 and number 4.
How do you put those? I mean, it's kind of hard to do, but we know who number 1 is.
1 and 4 are pretty easy. Even though I'm going to get slammed for this comment. I'm going to get slammed, but I'm going to state it anyway. So there's a stigma around Urban Meyer right now, but it has nothing to do with his accomplishments as a college football coach. So a lot of people can't separate that. So what he did in Jacksonville, what he does in bars, whatever. We can have that discussion another time, or other people like to take off on that kind of stuff. But we typically stick to the football. So bam, his college coaching career in some respects eclipse Saban. And I know people are going to go crazy, but if you're just talking about winning games, if you're talking about, we don't have a BCS, we don't have a playoff system, we don't have people selecting playoff teams, we don't have this structure. If you're just talking about wherever he shows up, you play games and win, his record's way beyond Saban's. He's got a much better winning percentage than Nick Saban does. He never went to a Michigan State and just had a decent record. You know, he supercharged everywhere he went. So I know it would be climbing uphill, and I know that I would get buried, but I kind of like being the contrarian and would love that debate. Not that I completely believe it, but again, if you're just talking winning percentage, he's the best of all time. Okay.
May I push back?
Sure. You can't push back on the last comment because that's a fact.
No, I'm not. I just want to address. I'm pushing back, kind of like you like to play devil's advocate. Here's my question to you. The thing is you brought up recently about when we were talking about Riley's coach. You intimated the fact that he was handed a program, and at Utah, Urban did it. You know, I mean, amazing. But everywhere else he's gone to a stacked cupboard. Maybe Florida wasn't doing very well, but wouldn't you agree when he got to Florida, that thing that Ron Zook, those players that Ron Zook had there, Urban came in right away and won. Why? Because he had some really good talent there. Would you agree?
Yeah.
For instance, he didn't have a Saban situation where he rolls into, MSU and he's like, let's face it, that was kind of a mess, right? And he was pedestrian there. But then, then he goes off to LSU. LSU had a pretty good program going, but he took it to a national championship level. And then he goes to Alabama, and Alabama was really in the weeds. And look what he's done there, right? And then you look at Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll comes to USC. USC was again, kind of like a dumpster fire like it is now. We've only had like 3 or 4 losing seasons in the past 30 years. Carroll came in, and I think 2000, Hackett, we were like, someone will probably correct me in the chat, but I think we were like 5-6 or something. Or 5-7. I can't remember exactly what it was. And he, again, you referenced the 6-6 Carroll season, but I mean it. Everyone in my section, all the season ticket holders, were like, look at this retread. Okay. But every game, that dude won us over, because every game, although we were losing early, we're like, whoa, this dude, wow, look at his defense. Look at this game. You could see even the 6-6 season that this guy could coach. and he turned it around almost immediately. I mean, going to a national championship 2 years, taking that USC team from Paul Hackett to a national champion team in 2 years, that was pretty amazing to do. But so it seems like you're leaning towards, if I hear you right, I'm guessing you're saying that Saban, Meyer, Carroll, and then Dabo, if I'm hearing you right.
I've not even sorted out Carroll and Dabo quite yet. So Carroll did it at one place. So I want to make that so everything you say is reasonable. So I'm not going to argue with any of it. It's reasonable. There are other points to be made, but Pete Carroll did it at one place. Dabo Sweeney's done it at one place. Urban Meyer's done it at 3 places. Nick Saban's done it at 2 places, because I'm not counting Michigan State. I know he elevated them, but he didn't do much there. Didn't accomplish much. Pardon me?
Carroll did it at USC. Carroll did it at USC and in Seattle. I think it's pretty safe to say that Pete could have gone anywhere and done what he did.
Well, we're talking about college football, correct?
No, I know, Mark. What I'm saying is Carroll only coached at one place. You know what I mean? I think that Pete could have done that. Let's say USC gets in trouble, and like, what's the narrative everyone wants to say? He sees the NCAA coming because he was handing bags of, McDonald's bags of cash to his players, which is complete bull. But he's running at the door, and let's say he goes to an LSU, or he goes to a Georgia, or he goes to a Florida. Is anyone here going to say that Pete Carroll would not have repeated success he had at USC at one of those schools, or at Ohio State? What Pete Carroll had going on with his recruiting, with his defense, just with his program building, he could have repeated that at any powerhouse. Do you agree or disagree?
Well, I don't tend to speculate. I'll give my opinion and speculate, but similar to Georgia playing Alabama in the championship game this past year, and Alabama missing its best 2 wide receivers, I don't mind when Alabama fans say they think, okay, we would have won that game. Like, I don't think I cut them off when they say we would have won that game. There's no question about it. We would have won that game. I don't mind the opinion that we believe we would have won the game. That's our opinion. So similarly, to speculate on what Pete Carroll would have done in some fantasy situation that we're never going to know. Yeah, it appears he did it once, that he would have done that, and he elevated the Seahawks, that he would have gone to another football brand and been successful similarly. But I'm not going to give him the credit for doing that, because he didn't do it. So I'm not going to give him the Urban Meyer or Nick Saban, you can go anywhere and do it, because they did it. He didn't do it.
Right. Urban walked into when Urban went to Ohio State, he was handed the keys. I mean, you really dismissed Riley getting the job and anything that happened because of Oklahoma. I mean, when Urban showed up, and granted, Urban, I think, did take it to a different level, obviously, and did an amazing job at Ohio State. But again, he walked into a top 5 program when he showed up there. That was already rolling, So again, that same argument probably would be applicable, right?
Well, if we want to go with your argument and keep extending it, why can't Jim Tressel be considered for the Mount Rushmore?
Did Jim Tressel ever win 33 consecutive games? Was he at number 1 33 consecutive weeks in the AP? Did he win a couple of national championships, 3 Heisman Trophy winners? Did he win, did he have 63 straight games with 20 points or more? Did he go to 7 straight BCS games and win all of them? Lost the national championship by a yard. I don't know. I mean, I hear it. I don't think Tressel or Dabo are even in the conversation, in my opinion. I think most people would agree with that.
Well, I'm just raising that because he took over a program that was, there was talent there. and it was in decent shape, but it wasn't in Ohio State shape, and elevated to a national championship immediately, second season. And he continually won the Big Ten, won 90% of his games, played in national championship game, played in BCS bowl games, contrary to popular belief, had a winning record in BCS bowl games. And so I'm just throwing him out there as a possibility. So,
a lot of people say that. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was talking over you. Please go ahead.
I don't know where I was going with that now, but so I was distinguishing, or in the process of distinguishing, between Dabo and Carroll, with Saban 1 and Meyer 2 was my thought process because of the points that I made. Dabo did elevate a program in 2009. It took him a little bit more time, but as a first-year head coach, as a first-time head coach, where Pete Carroll had all that NFL experience and previous college experience and Dabo didn't, it's pretty remarkable. And obviously that's why you brought him up, what he's been able to do at Clemson. I think it's arguable that he's in that. I think you brought up the 4 right guys to place on Mount Rushmore in terms of what order. I don't think there is a order to Mount Rushmore. So, but that would be my order.
No.
Off the top of my head would be, yes, Saban, Meyer, Carroll, Dabo.
And you give the nod to Meyer because he not only won at Florida, but he also won at Ohio State.
Okay. In Utah.
I mean, I guess I don't see really penalizing. Well, if you look at Utah, you look at he has some really good quarterback, and again, it's not very stiff competition, and he's a good coach. But I mean, I don't really see the Utah as, I don't know, that's just my bias. I don't really see that as like big boy football, and I'm gonna get killed by every Ute in the world.
Well, I understand that perspective, but it's still monumental what he did at Utah. It's still substantial. It's
I lost you.
Well, I'm just stating that it's worth noting. It's beyond worth noting. It's part of the, what should be more considered, what Urban Meyer did at Utah or what Nick Saban did at Michigan State. So winning 55 or 60% of your games in the Big Ten, is that more impressive than dominating at Utah?
Well, again, it's going to be blasphemy. One, I think that, obviously Nick was still figuring it out probably back then. He's I wouldn't say young, but he was new, he was a head coach in a big job in the Big Ten and figuring it out. And then you got to look at support. I mean, look at the support you get at, let's say, Ohio State compared to Michigan State. Or definitely look at the difference between, look at the progression. He went from Michigan State to LSU to Alabama. And again, what Nick Saban has built and had at Alabama has pretty much set the benchmark for excellence in a program. A lot of it can be questioned. Let's face it, a lot of money built that program. But you're also looking at, when he was at Michigan State, what kind of support system did he have? Whereas at Alabama, what is he receiving as well? A lot of that goes into it. I'm just saying, I don't know. I think that you're penalizing Carroll for the fact that he basically coached 9 years in college. And the fact that he didn't go somewhere else. And so I see your point. You're giving a longevity thing. You're saying, hey, look, he went from this school to this school to this school. I would push back on the fact that besides Utah, Meyer never built a program. Sorry, I misspoke. there were all the pieces, the players. Would you agree when he got to Florida that cupboard was stacked?
Yeah.
I mean, Zook was looking it, but he could recruit. And then when he got to Ohio State, again, if Oklahoma was purring, OSU was flying when Meyer got there. And again, I think he took it to a different level. I think he's an amazing coach. But I look at those 9 years that Pete Carroll was at USC and what he did in those 9 years in a row, I think you're hard pressed. I think the only person really, to me, that had a run like that is Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll did have, if you look at those 7 years, especially, Mark, that's the closest thing we've had to Saban and his success. Would you agree or disagree?
Why is Urban Meyer's accomplishments and his records not comparable, if not succeeding Pete Carroll's during that time? His winning percentage is better. Pete Carroll won how many national championships?
What about his?
He won 2. Meyer won 3.
Right.
And if you
football's a game of inches, and
if you
and
take
good coaches win the close games. Look how close he was to 3 straight. And
yeah,
he even said it here. He just missed out on a bunch. You're right. I mean, ifs and buts, right? I get that.
Well, yeah, and I can
But
grab
look
a
how
bunch of
close that
Urban
is.
Meyer seasons in which he could have been a playoff team. He just wasn't selected. He had an undefeated team in 2012 that should have been eligible to play in the national championship game, but because
that would have won.
And
yeah, no, again, I'm going back. I'm
his,
just saying
his 15, 17, and 18 teams could have been in playoffs. So what I'm saying is take Pete Carroll's block of time at USC and put it on top of any 9-year block of Urban Meyer post Utah, and Urban Meyer can match it, if not exceed it.
Well, the problem, again, what I'm trying to say is Pete Carroll went 6-6. You keep going back to his record, right? Pete Carroll went 6-6 in his first year because he was taking over a complete dumpster fire.
Leave that off. Okay.
I mean, and that hurt.
Sure.
And that hurt.
Leave it off.
Well, if you leave that off, then I bet you they have pretty comparable records.
Yeah, but Pete Carroll.
I could be wrong. Did Meyer go to 7 straight BCS games
during all those
and win them? Sorry, I keep doing that. Sorry. His record in BCS was 6. He was what would it be? He would have been 6-1 in BCS bowls. Is that right, Carroll?
I guess so. 02, 03, and
he only lost the 05 games. Only he lost.
So then, yeah. So then he was 3-1, and then he went 4-1, 5-1, 6-1. Yes.
6, 7, and 8. Yeah.
So
he was 6-1 in BCS.
Urban Meyer won a BCS game in 04, 06, 08, 3-0. 09 didn't go. No, yeah, he did. He won the Sugar Bowl, 4-0. And then he goes to Ohio State and he loses an Orange Bowl. So he's 4-1. Then he wins the national championship. So he wins 2. He's 6-1. Then he loses a playoff game. He's 6-2. And then he wins the Cotton Bowl and the Rose Bowl. He's 8-2 in BCS bowl games and playoff games. With 3 national championships.
He had where, again, didn't close the deal, but he wasn't the one following that block on 4th and 1. It wasn't Pete Carroll following that block. Otherwise, he would have had 3 straight. It was a terrible, whatever. I'm not going to go back to that. I don't want to think about that game ever. Yeah, you have an argument. I'm saying I just don't think it's as cut and dry as I think you said. I think you could say it's Urban. You can do that, but I don't think it's like a blink of an eye. Well, it's Saban, then Urban, then Carroll. I think that it's Saban of those 3. It's Saban number 1, and I think you make a huge argument when it comes to Meyer and to Carroll. Just simply because my point on Carroll is, I think, fair or unfair, everyone said that he ran from the NCAA. Anyone that knows Pete Carroll says Pete Carroll got bored at USC. He always had his eyes on going back to the NFL. Pete Carroll was never coming to USC to be a lifelong USC coach. Just wasn't doing that ever. And as soon as going back even to 2009 and 2008, Pete Carroll for 2 years had been begging because he'd seen where football was going. He wanted Heritage Hall to give him the money to build a new weight room so he could continue to recruit the level he was recruiting. And you know what they told him? They go, why do you need all that? You've already won a national championship. Why do you need money to upgrade the facilities? And Pete Carroll just started getting bored and frustrated, and he checked out. And then all he did is went off to the NFL and became one of the best coaches in the NFL for the past decade and a half. Decade or so. So I agree with you on the fact that Urban Meyer definitely did it at 2 places. I would say, though, again, at both stops he was at, he didn't build either one. Florida's an iffy one.
3.
Because they weren't doing too well. But again, he walked into a pretty good situation. What's up?
3.
What's 3, Mark?
Utah, Florida, Ohio State.
He did well at Utah.
I only have 2 other points to make. One would be that Daniel is pointing out that as I was brushing through Urban Meyer's record, I forgot 1 Fiesta Bowl win against Notre Dame. He's correct. So 9-2 in BCS and national championship games. And then also, if we want to go the route of speculation and what Pete Carroll could have continued to do, and some of the speculation that you made in regards to him going somewhere else, which is certainly reasonable, we could also make the speculation about Jim Tressel, probably where he had Ohio State at its peak. His last season at Ohio State, he went 12-1, won the Sugar Bowl, won the Big Ten, finished in the top 4 in the country, and then came the crazy tattoo scandal, which seems crazy now to figure that if that went on today, here we are only 11 years later, if that would have gone on today, that would have been a joke. It's allowable. It's so he got in trouble for covering up for players that were doing something that would be legal 8 or 9 years later. So
that was his problem, though, the cover up. I think it was ridiculous. I think the fact that what they tried to go after some free tattoos was absurd. Every school across the nation has been giving money, including USC, to players for years. OSU, any SEC team you want to name, Texas, Oklahoma, everybody's given their play. It's been the problem I've always had is the people that give money to kids to come to your school, to give them cars to come to Alabama. That's where you run into the big issue. Everyone knows these kids have been getting money under the table. You want to go that far, though.
And so Jim Tressel, who knows how long he would have kept going.
Would Bush's situation, right? Bush situation was his dad got money from a marketing agent, right? Which absolutely would be illegal in this day and age of NIL. Had nothing to do with USC. That was proven. Nothing to do with USC. He got money. His family got money from a marketing agent, and USC got leveled. And that's why we're talking about USC where they've been for the past 10 years. If we really want to go down that road. But anyway, again, I'm a Trojan in a completely unholy land when it comes to this chat. I'm reading this chat laughing my ass off at my buddy Eric. This comment.
So the comment that I just posted, Tim, this always cracks me up when people bring up incomplete information. So Dave, being a huge Alabama fan, of course, cites that Saban has 269 wins, Meyer 187, and Carroll 83. Well, Nick Saban has also lost 67 games, and Urban Meyer's lost 32. So,
and actually, the 83, he's taking away that season in 2004.
Oh yeah, don't do that.
Sorry, in 2005. So Carroll had over 100. Well, he had like 100 wins. I don't know what this 83 is. And Carroll only coached, the 9 years. And my favorite fact is Pete Carroll won't even be in the Hall of Fame because they have a stupid rule saying you got to coach 10 years.
Oh my
word! To be in the Hall of Fame. So he coaches 9, and
That's
Pete Carroll. That's okay. He'll get his yellow jacket instead. So I mean,
but still,
you know
that's
what I mean?
yeah, the College Football Hall of Fame. Who pays attention to it? And they have these stupid rules. Yes, you got to win 60% of your games. So Howard Schnellenberger falls short by like 0.3%. And he built two programs that obviously, or three programs, and any idiot knows that, you know, when you're trying to build a program, I mean, from the dust, not build a program like that's been around for 100 years, but actually build the program from zero, starting the program that you're going to, and to put in artificial barometers or parameters that don't take into account people giving it context. And I'm all for guidelines, but not rules. Guidelines. Yes. Pete Carroll not being in the College Football Hall of Fame is asinine.
Yeah. And again, I don't think many people could argue the fact that, yeah, Pete had two. He's a yard short of three straight. And that 2008, the fact that that 2008 Trojan football team was not the DCS. I mean, if you look at the defense that they, I mean, I'll just name the linebackers: Maluga, Cushing, and oh my God, Matthews. You talk about three guys that played at a high level in NFL for a number of years. And those are just the linebackers. I mean, you can go Darnell Bing, you can go to safety stuff. That team, that 2008 defense, until the bowl game that they played, they were averaging less than 10, giving up 10 points a game that year. And I think it was like 8.9 points a game they gave up in the regular season, that USC defense. And yet Mark Sanchez at quarterback. I can go on and on. But if USC, if Carroll was a coach during the playoff years, like Saban has done, and I am not taking anything away from Saban, who's easily the GOAT. But if Carroll and Pete had been able to go to playoffs, he would have gone to 7 straight playoffs, probably winning at least 3 to 4 of those with those teams he had. I mean, he had the best team in the country probably about 6 of those 7 years, and found a way up in the Pacific Northwest to lose. And that's what killed him. Eric, you know why?
It sounds like you're starting to argue against him.
You're a Duck fan.
No,
Absolutely. Well, I mean, you can't. Not really, Mark. No, you can't, because this is college football. This isn't professional football. I'm not arguing against them. Coaches get your team ready for it, but you're talking about a team played with 18 to 22-year-old kids. And when for instance, who was it? Ohio State, it was Ohio State. They played Ohio State. They beat Ohio State pretty soundly at home, and then they go up to, they really put a beat down on Ohio State. They're probably jacked up, and then they go up to a trap game and lose to Ohio State, into Oregon State. We go, well, that's bad coaching. No, I think that's just coaching 18. You know, anyone. I mean, I've been around.
Yeah, but we can all start going into coaching resumes, and I can do the same thing with Urban Meyer and start to discount a few losses because of the same thing.
And it's all valid. I'm not saying that Pete Carroll's the only one that's run into that kind of thing. It's happened. So, I mean, we're going around circles. I agree with you on it.
Yeah, it's a close call. It's a great argument. You certainly brought up the 4 that matter, and I can't. Maybe based on longevity,
3 and 4,
maybe Bob Stoops could get some consideration against Dabo. So, but I will move on to these other calls since we have dissected this to a T.
I'd love to hear sometime in the future about Dabo versus Pete Carroll, because it seems like you're dropping Pete Carroll pretty far down the line. But all right, Mark. I didn't appreciate the time, and I always enjoy talking to you.
I told you Saban, Meyer, Carroll, Dabo.
I mean, I don't think Dabo and Pete are even in the same conversation.
Well, you're the one who brought them up in the same conversation. You started the conversation, Tim.
I gave you the list of the 4 people you named earlier when you were talking to the real MVP. You named those 4. You named those 4 coaches. And I went, oh, that's a good point. I wonder what Mark thinks about ranking these 4 in a row. And again,
Gotcha.
I'm not arguing your points. I think you got a very good argument. I really do. It's just I'm not looking at the chat because I'm looking at a bunch of teams who have people that have teams that they're just haters.
Well,
but what
Tim,
Pete Carroll did from 2002 to 2008 is pretty much undisputed.
as you well know, we all look at this, and I do my very best not to, but I am not going to discount my humanity, that we all look at this through the colored glasses of the team that we root for or the conference. And people that discount that and just blindly root and argue without giving credit or due to the other side is just, it's what keeps the show going. Actually, it's what keeps people watching. So that's part of being a fanatic, is that, I made the point, this is the last thing I'll say, and I know you didn't ask for this, but I made the point the other night talking to Miami fans that how is it that, and this is not directed at Miami fans, this is directed at sports fans, period. We'll take the Ohio State Miami Fiesta Bowl, that if we showed that play that decided the game, if we showed it to 100 Ohio State fans, 99, if not 100, would say that was the correct call. It was interference. Justice was served. Boom. If we showed that same play to 100 Miami fans, 99, if not 100, would say we got robbed. It was the wrong call. Okay. We know that there's nothing anatomically different about the eyes of those individuals. But we know that our perception of sports is based on our biases, because if you took that exact situation and suddenly you made those teams Missouri and Washington State, those 100 people that were so adamant on one side or the other would be totally mixed, because we all watch sports and therefore we form our arguments through our human emotions and our rooting interests. And anybody who discounts that is crazy, because there's no way that 100 Miami fans can see one play and 100 Ohio State fans, and they have that, if they're being unbiased, there's no way that they can come to that dichotomy of a determination of that play. We all know why they argue their side, because they want to win. They want to show that their team is the best, not because they're being impartial. I do my best to be impartial. I stated in this chat a couple times, running through those BCS seasons of 2000 through 09. For example, in 07, I didn't say LSU and Ohio State rightfully played in the national championship game. I said I would have loved to have seen LSU and USC, because I believe that they were the two best teams in the country. And I could say that discounting Ohio State other times. So I'm at least able to put aside my fandom and tell you when Ohio State wasn't the best or wasn't one of the two best. In 2016, I often rant about how Penn State should have been in the playoff, not Ohio State. So I at least attempt to do that as best I can. So, all right, Tim. Well, thanks for the call.
Really quick before I go, Mark.
Sure, go ahead.
That's pretty much why I watch you. Usually when I go to a college show, I'm not going to name names. Let's say they're, I don't know, a Georgia fan. Or let's say they're a Duck fan, and what's this other team? It's blatantly clear the bias that's involved. I appreciate two big things from you. One, I know you're as objective as you can humanly be as a lifelong Buckeye fan. I think you are far more objective than I think I could ever be, because when I go and usually I call the fanatics, I am a fanatic. I am ridiculous about my affiliation, to my alma mater and to, a team. Basically, I was indoctrinated. My dad has 2 degrees from USC. So I'm born and raised Cardinal and Gold. I can't be objective. But that doesn't mean that my logic about, my team is flawed. 2008. But anyway, I appreciate the fact that you are objective. And again, your knowledge on everything. I like when people call you out. You don't just spit stuff and hang up on people. You always allow people to rant, and I appreciate the time.
Well, Eric, I'm going to extend the call one other time because I do appreciate what you just said. Because sometimes I wish my team was not Ohio State, because Ohio State is obviously in the thick of all this all the time. Whether you're talking from season to season, who's the best, who's number one, who should be playing for the playoff, or you're talking historic. I wish if I could suddenly be a Purdue fan and then I could just talk about all these teams, but I, again, do my best to take a square shot at Ohio State, but it's kind of easy to make the argument that they are one of the best or the best, depending on the scenario and depending on the argument and the time frame, because they have the metrics to back it up. So I have metrics to back up, and I'm trying, and I'm, again, not trying to take up for them, but when I do.
Now, OSU, if you look at 20 years of OSU football, I don't think there's anybody for the past 20 years that has consistently been a top 10 team. And so anyone talks smack about the Buckeyes, it happens in the chat sometimes. I just laugh. You know, I mean, I think you and I said this one time. I think USC has had higher points. We can argue that all day long.
Yeah.
Over all the years, over Ohio State, but Ohio State has been a consistent force in college football for 30 years, especially 40 years, especially the last 10 years. Yes, they had 3 years. There were a couple of bad years, but I mean, overall, just consistently since 2000, if any program tries to say that they've been more consistent than Ohio State, the numbers just don't back it up. They just don't. Okay, listen, I'm going to go before Eric has a tizzy fit. So I appreciate the time.
Thanks for the call, Tim. I appreciate it. And I've got a feeling from the numbers on the next phone call that we're going to be talking more Ohio State here in just a second. David, how you doing?
Well, that was some interesting analysis, if I must say so, Mark Rogers. I will make a couple of points as far as Urban Meyer's favor here. It's pretty impressive, I believe, when the only coaches that have a higher winning percentage are by the name of Leahy and Rockne, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and that's why sometimes, David, I will say he's got the greatest winning percentage of all time, and I know that that's not accurate to the letter, but I'm basically discounting anything pre-World War II. I'm basically saying during way before any of us started watching football, anything that we could consider to be modern football post-World War II, Urban Meyer, if all you're going to calculate, you're going to take out voting and selection committees, and you're going to take out buffoonery and bars and all that. Just talk about who wins the most times when their team goes out on the field. I'm sorry. I know people are going to go crazy about Nick Saban, and I understand him being the greatest of all time. And it's not just about wins and losses, but if we start there, just who wins the most when their team goes out on the field, it's Urban Meyer, and that's not debatable. That's a fact.
Well, I mean, when you look at it, first of all, I would say this. Number one, he was able to win even at Bowling Green. Number two, I don't know how many undefeated seasons Utah has had in their history. Maybe we can pull that up. But I guarantee you it's not a lot. He produced one of them. Now, obviously, he had a really good quarterback, but you're always going to have some players to win. I mean, he had to recruit those guys. And, you know, at Ohio, I mean, he took over a talented team, and we talked about the fact that the majority of his players were Zook's players in 06. But mind you, that team he had in 08, that was his team. He built that national championship team in 08. So he built the team on his own players. And, you know, obviously he took over, you know, you could talk about the situation from Jim Tressel. Now, mind you, in 2011, that was a 6-7 football team. So that was not a very good football team that year. But, I mean, you know, Tressel did lead him to talent. I'm not going to argue that. But a majority of the 2014 team were his recruits. So, you know, you have to look at that as well. I mean, there was a few Tressel guys on the 14 national championship team, but a high percentage of that team was his recruits. So I think to do it really at three places, some would say even four places, is a pretty good statement of success. Now, I always say that from an Ohio State perspective, I mean, I think he could have made a really great case if that 15 team would have repeated. If that 15 team would have repeated, then we can really have a conversation, because then he drills a pretty good sized hole in the history of college football if he goes back to back.
Absolutely. And again, I don't want people to misconstrue what I just said. I didn't say that Nick Saban was not the greatest coach of all time, because there is more to it than just saying who has the best winning percentage.
Sure.
So if we take the other
Right,
factors involved, then we elevate Saban because of all the great things that he's done in winning championships. So I'm not saying that. I was just making the point that if I want to be a contrarian, I can fight uphill, and I could argue that Urban Meyer is the greatest coach of all time. I may not win that argument, but I can give a pretty good fight. And when it comes down to it, what is the one thing that could not be that you don't need to give a lot of context to, and that's who wins the most games versus how many times their team hit the field. And Urban Meyer has the best winning percentage in the history of college football in the modern era post World War II.
Right. I would agree. And then, I think that if you also couple with the fact, like you said, he did it with, multiple programs. I think that's the other, thing that you have to say as well. By the way, I tend to agree with you on Tressel. I think Tressel gets underrated. I think Tressel's kind of the same thing. Although I'll say from an Ohio State perspective, and we talked about that 06 national championship game, and maybe Ohio State fans have said this just bottom line. Maybe Ohio State fans found out that night who the better coach was. Because if Tressel wins that game, how much higher is Tressel on people's list if he wins again in 06?
Sure. Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
I mean, is it? I mean, that could be a fair statement too. So, I mean, there's a lot of games that, sway things one way or another in an all-time narrative. And I understand where the caller was coming before on, if 1 yard goes the other way, or if USC gets the stop on Vince Young at the end of that game, or they make a play or whatever and win that championship in 05. I mean, I get it. Now, they caught some luck to get into that game. I mean, Reggie Bush did push Matt Leinart into the end zone. So, I mean, sometimes you catch some breaks too. So, I mean, there's, that break door can swing both ways on you guys. It's not, I mean, you catch some breaks too. So, but I would argue this. I want to get to these national championship years. I have the debatable years, and then I have the not so debatable years. I think the first one that's obviously debatable is starting in 2000. How Miami doesn't get in after beating Florida State. Has anyone ever figured that one out?
Well, also remember, David, that Washington beat Miami.
That's right. Because they ended up beating Drew Brees in Purdue in the Rose Bowl that year.
Yeah. So I don't know if you saw when we reviewed that year, Miami 1 loss, Florida State 1 loss, Washington 1 loss. Of course, as you mentioned, Miami beat Florida State, but Washington beat Miami. And Washington's 1 loss was pretty respectable. They lost to an Oregon State team that finished 11-1 and won the Fiesta Bowl and beat Notre Dame and finished in the top 5 in the country. That was Washington's 1 loss, 33-30 against that Oregon State team.
Right. Yeah. The thing. By the way, there was a few NFL guys. Wasn't like the Chad Johnson, or they had a few NFL guys.
TJ Houshmandzadeh. Yep.
Houshmandzadeh. Was Steven Jackson the running back from the Rams on that team too?
Yes.
Yeah, they had some really good NFL guys on that team. Yeah, that's right. They destroyed Notre Dame because I remember they went out and they lost at Washington, I believe was their loss that year. Because from that point on, that's when Miami went on the 34-game winning streak.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
And who ended that 34-game winning streak, by the way, Mark Rogers?
You want to get me in trouble, don't you?
Well, hey, I was just wondering if the Miami fans in the chat were ready to chime in. But,
David,
it's interesting about the Miami. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm going to bring up something that I'm going to bring up something that I brought up, but it goes along with the conversation the other night because this was driving me nuts. We're in the Miami show, and somebody had to throw out Mark's an Ohio State fan, and then everybody just starts going crazy, and how much they hate Ohio State. And I was just trying to reason with them to say, why is your hatred, your venom directed at Ohio State? I understand emotionally why it would be that way, but if you reason with your brain, this is not a pickup basketball game. This is not players calling their own fouls. The players line up where the officials tell them to. I've never seen a mutiny or any kind of rebellion by the players to not do exactly what the officials tell them to do. So Ohio State had no control. This comment, they cheated. No, they didn't cheat.
Yes.
You can go on and on all you want that the officials made a bad call. You have that right, but nobody cheated. This was not Bill Belichick spying on the Rams. They didn't cheat. They just happened to be that team could have been Alabama. It could have been Missouri. It could have been Kent State on the other side. Why you hate Ohio State? They had absolutely nothing to do with it.
They will never talk about the fact that Chris Gamble was held at the end of regulation.
Absolutely.
And he caught the pass, and the game would have been 17-14, and they would have killed the clock, and Roscoe Parrish would have not returned the punt, so they could have kicked the field goal to even get it into the overtime.
Absolutely.
So leave that point mute. Could not make their argument. It is not germane to their conversation. Let's put it that way.
What I would like to do sometime, David, is sit here and replay the game and show it and have us talk about it, especially maybe just the fourth quarter. And exactly, I've brought that play up. People don't bring that play up because it's not at the end of the game and it doesn't fit that narrative. It's just like Ohio State fans. If Ohio State fans want to hate Clemson, I fully believe, and I hate to state this again because this makes me sound like a homer, but if somebody really watches me on a fairly regular basis, they'll understand this is not coming from a homer standpoint. This could have been two completely different teams. I think Ohio State, and I've been hesitant to state it this way, but I'll just flat out say they were robbed against Clemson. That's all there is to it. And they weren't robbed once. They were robbed 3 times. But did Clemson have any control? Was Clemson cheating? Do I have any animosity toward? No, Clemson had nothing to do with it. They just happened to be the team on the other side of the field. They had nothing to do with it.
And there was a myriad of plays that could have gone the opposite way. And listen, I understand that we had problems in the red, and I'll point out our own problems in the game where we had missed opportunities in the red zone and things like that. Just like Miami fans in 02 might want to point out the fact that don't turn the ball over 5 times and you might not lose, which the most important stat next to the scoreboard is the turnover battle, and everybody knows that. So, but again, it's not convenient to the conversation. So, we can go there. I would say as far as other debatable national title years, certainly 03, I think everybody would have liked to have just seen LSU and USC, and why it didn't happen after Kansas State dump trucked Oklahoma, nobody has an idea on why. And I would say Auburn would have still, although I think, I always said 04 USC was the peak USC team. I don't know if Tim's still in there, and if he feels the same way. But I think he would acknowledge their 04 team was a better team than their 05 team because they had a better defense in 04 than they had in 05. But I still think Auburn gives them a better game than Oklahoma. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Oh, absolutely. I wanted to see Auburn play USC. I still believe USC was the best team, but it would have been nice to have seen Auburn get the shot. Sure.
I do think that, obviously the rematch proved that it shouldn't have happened in 06. Unfortunately for both teams, the bowl games did not work out. So, it was probably justified that it was what it was in 06. I would argue in 07, Mark, that I think you said LSU and USC were the 2 best teams. I actually think Georgia might have been right there in 07. What do you think?
Well, I've got the banner up right now. This took me about a half hour to type out all the teams that could be considered. But if we're just talking about who earned it and just looking at wins and losses, then I make my Kansas argument because they were the only one-loss team. But if we're talking about best teams, yeah, I still side LSU, USC, but certainly, unfortunately, Georgia lost head-to-head to Tennessee. Therefore, that game was not played between LSU and Georgia in the SEC championship game.
Right.
I was trying to peel back what would have happened in the poll era if we did a +1. So Ohio State goes to the Rose Bowl, they play USC, and maybe we get a Georgia LSU game in the Sugar Bowl. But and then we could have played a +1. But yeah, I lean LSU and USC, but certainly Georgia. There was a lot of talk about how good Georgia was that year, and I agree.
Well, I mean, that was just the craziest year in the history of college football. I mean, the only two-loss national champion that we've ever seen, right, Mark?
Yep.
That I think we saw a national champion with a loss and a tie, but never a two-loss one.
That is right.
So, I do think that 2008, I would say this. I actually do think Florida and USC were probably the two best teams. It's interesting, Mark. I actually think that you could make an argument that Florida was playing maybe the fourth best team, maybe the fifth best team in the country that year. At the very worst, maybe the fourth best team in Oklahoma. Because remember, Texas beat Oklahoma that year.
By 10.
Right. So, yeah, I found that. Now, Oklahoma accounted themselves fairly well in that game. I mean, that was a competitive game.
Yeah.
I believe it was tied after 3 quarters. And, Florida, kind of ended up winning by what was it, 24-14 or something like that?
Yep.
So, I mean, it's not like they got completely dump trucked. So, I mean, it was a good game for about 3.5 quarters. But I definitely think that USC and Florida were the two best teams. Well, that was a really good Florida. I would like to have seen that game, USC and Florida in 2008. I mean, I think that those teams would have matched up pretty well. I might have leaned Florida would have been slightly better, but that would have been real close. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I was campaigning for USC and Florida. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I think Texas. By the way, what's interesting? The call was saying that the Alabama situation that Saban inherited. Did he not inherit that bad of a situation from David Shula? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Wasn't Shula like a 10-win coach the year or two before Saban took over?
Yeah, so they were only 1 year removed from winning the Cotton Bowl and going 10-2. I'll double check on the years on that, but
I think it was either 05 or 06 because Saban took over in 07.
I believe it was 05.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Yeah, that was a top 10 team.
In a majority of the players that he got, because he got within 1 quarter of playing for the national title in 08. That was those 2 title games with him and Urban in 08 and 09. And they led going into the 4th quarter. I watched that SEC title game in 08. They could have played for the national title, and the majority of his recruits on his 08 team, I believe, were Shula's recruits, if I'm not mistaken.
Sure. Yeah,
So,
the 2005
Shula
Alabama team went 10-2 and won the Sugar Bowl or won the Cotton Bowl, finished in the top 10.
So Shula must not have left the cupboard completely bare for Nick Saban.
No, he certainly churned out NFL players immediately, and that he did not recruit and sign himself.
So, I mean, that's all I was going to say. I mean, for people that's saying that maybe Saban wasn't taking over, a bad situation, as I said, I from what I remember, Shula had won some games there before he had gotten it. And obviously, it totally makes sense for them to get Nick Saban, clearly the better coach. And I've recited the fact he is the greatest coach of all time. And obviously, they've had the greatest run of all time. But, I definitely don't think it was a bad situation that he inherited is really the long and short of what I'm saying. So, obviously, I think we would both agree 09, they got it right, Mark.
Oh, yeah.
The only thing that we wonder about 09 is if Colt McCoy doesn't get hurt, would that maybe have changed that game.
Yeah, if we could only go back and see the best matchups, and the best matchup would have been a healthy Colt McCoy. Yep.
Because that was correct me if I'm wrong, that was a 3-point game with 3.5 minutes left.
Yep.
With Gilbert in at quarterback, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it was
right?
24-21.
Right. And I mean, I just wonder, because the Alabama fans say, well, you know, if our receivers don't get hurt, we don't win. You think Texas fans in 09 are wondering if Colt McCoy doesn't get hurt, what they may be saying?
Sure. Absolutely.
And that's an interesting game, because what happened to Texas right after that, too?
Yeah, they collapsed. They only won 5 games the next year.
Yeah. Talk about a game where two programs, you know, we talked about Ohio State and Miami in 02. Texas and Alabama in 09 would be a great example of two programs that went in opposite directions after that game.
For sure.
So.
All right, David.
All right. Well, it's always a pleasure to talk college football with you, Mark.
Appreciate it, David. You have a good night.
Take care.
Let's take these 2 calls, and then we will wrap it up for the night. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's Michael. How you doing tonight, sir?
Michael, I'm doing well. What's going on?
Now, but hey, you guys just talked about Saban and all them earlier. I'm going to give you 5 other coaches and see which 4 or 5 of them you would replace the 4 that you talked about. Barry Alvarez, Barry Switzer, Tom Osborne, Bo Schembechler, Don James.
That's a good list. So you want me to put them in order?
No, which ones would you leave on Mount Rushmore, and which ones would you omit of those 9 coaches?
Oh, kick out Schembechler. Sorry, Bo. It's close, but I'd have to dissect Don James. Yeah, that's what it comes down to. I guess I would look at Don James' record. The other 3, Switzer, well, Alvarez, hang on. Switzer and Osborne are gimmies. They're arguably, you know, they're in the top 10 in history, close. So those 2 are there. Osborne 1, Switzer 2. Then after that, I would really, to do it justice, would have to really do a deep dive on records and so forth. But off the top of my head, I believe I'm going Don James over Bo Schembechler with I'm losing track of who else you threw out there. Oh, Barry Alvarez. See, he had to resurrect, so he was in a different situation than the other ones in terms of what he had to do at Wisconsin. That was pretty remarkable.
Yep. All right, and I'm going to throw 3 other coaches out for you to make it more fun and maybe get this going for a little bit. Add fuel to fire in the chat. Howard Schnellberger, Jimmy Johnson, and I'm trying to think who Dennis. He replaced Johnson in Miami.
Dennis Erickson.
Thank you.
You want me to rank them?
Yeah. Well, they all won national championships, but will they be willing participants in your Mount Rushmore, or are they on the outside looking in?
Who's Mount Rushmore? All time?
What do you? Well, yeah, basically, I guess.
No, they're nowhere close. None of those guys are anywhere close to being on the all-time college football Mount Rushmore with guys like Saban, Bear Bryant, Woody Hayes, Paterno, Bowden. That's where you're going there. And then Urban Meyer, Pete Carroll. Yeah, those guys aren't at that level. They didn't coach. None of them coached long enough except Schnellenberger, and he went to a bunch of programs that there's no way that he could keep up that kind of pace.
But I'm trying to think, did he win 1 or 2 national championships in Miami?
They each won 1.
Wait
a minute. Timeout.
Okay.
Schnellenberger, 83, Johnson, 87. Then he went to the Cowboys, and then Erickson would have been 89, 91. So he won 2.
Okay. All right, that's what I think. I wasn't sure. I totally forgot about the other national championships and stuff like that. But no, I was just wondering stuff like. I mean, it's a fun debate you have with that tonight too. But my second question is, if they had the current format back in the 2000s and stuff like that, who would have top four been? And do you think they would have done like conferences and stuff like that, or do you think because not too many of them had the conference championship back in the 2000s? I think it was the SEC. Basically, was the only conference that had the conference championship, wasn't it?
The Big 12 started in 96.
Okay. But didn't they stop for a while and then started it back up?
They were down from 2010 to 17.
Okay, that's what it was. But the 4 teams the team.
Okay. I don't know what happened there, but sorry, Michael. Call us back another night. Oh, I think the entire line dropped. Let's see. Yes, it did. So my apologies to Michael and whomever else was on the line there, but yeah, the line dropped. So we will not get it. Let me see if this will pick up. No. All right, folks. Again, sorry about that. Yes, I must have ran out of minutes. So the phone bill went on for 2.5 hours tonight, which compared to recent shows is is better than it's been. All right, let me take a last look at the chat, and we will call it a night. Get some rest. Thanks, Chad. Appreciate it. Gene Chizik has a perfect bowl record. Yes, I believe it's 3-0. I think he won one before the national championship season. Then after the national championship season, they beat Northwestern. But I forget who they would have beaten in 09. 09 and 11, whatever. Yes. They won 2 bowl games. Maybe 2-0. Maybe 3-0. All right, folks. I'm punch drunk at this point. Have a great night, and we will see you on Tuesday with Iowa at 5:30 Eastern, Nebraska at 7, and be looking out for the next call-in show right here at the Voice of College Football. Hit the like button. Please use the Amazon link. And let's take one from Uncle Rico here. Isn't it crazy that most people think the 2014 national championship game was between Ohio State and Alabama? People don't even remember Oregon. Eric, please, I hope you're not listening to this. And SEC Dog, I can so much appreciate that little comment right there, because I know we disagree many times, but he still gives me respect as I do you, SEC Dog. So thank you so much for that. And John, yeah, whatever that was for. Okay, great. Thank you, Dave. Appreciate that. Bama fan, we disagree a lot, but still Dave's here. Appreciate that. Michael as well. Good to see you, Cheryl. Everybody have a great night, and we will see you Tuesday.